The Desert Stones, a journey of family and heart. Maria Alvarez grew up in the quiet town of Las Palmas, a place where the desert stretched for miles, painting the horizon with shades of gold and red. As a child, she had always been fascinated by the stories her grandfather told about the desert stones. He would sit on the porch of their old stone house, his hands rough and calloused as he traced the outlines of stones in the sand and spoke of their journey from the desert into their home. Each stone, he said, had a story, a history of endurance, strength, and beauty, and together they built more than a house. They built a home filled with memories, love, and family traditions. Maria would listen, wide-eyed, imagining herself walking through the desert, collecting stones like a treasure hunt that connected the past to the present. Her father, Antonio, was a quiet man who had inherited the strength of his father, but not always his patience. He worked long hours as a carpenter in a nearby town, and his presence at home was often measured in brief conversations at the dinner table or a nod in the hallway. Despite his distant nature, Maria admired him. He had a quiet sense of responsibility that carried the family forward, and he loved his children in ways that were sometimes unspoken but deeply felt. Maria's mother, Rosa, passed away when Maria was very young, leaving a gentle sadness that lingered in the house. The walls seemed to remember her mother's laughter, the smell of her cooking, and the way she had folded the clothes on the line just so. Maria felt a duty to keep her mother's memory alive in small ways, even as life moved quickly around her. Maria's childhood was shaped by both the desert and the family home. The house itself was a testament to her grandfather's life's work. Built from stones collected across the desert, each one placed by hand, it had thick walls that kept the house cool during scorching summers and warm in the rare desert winters. The house had an uneven charm, with tiny cracks and corners that revealed its age, but it was strong, and Maria loved it deeply. She spent hours exploring the backyard, imagining secret caves behind rocks and hidden passages beneath the sand. Sometimes she would sneak out at dawn to watch the sunrise, the desert stretching endlessly before her, feeling as though she was part of something much larger than herself. School was simple in Las Palmas. The classrooms were small, and the teachers knew every child by name. Maria enjoyed learning, though she was often distracted by the world outside the windows, the desert, the mountains, and the wind that seemed to whisper stories no one else could hear. Her friends would run and play, but Maria often stayed behind, sitting on the steps, sketching stones, and writing down the stories she imagined for each one. In her notebooks, she created worlds where the stones were more than just rocks. They were travelers, witnesses to time, keepers of secrets, and symbols of the endurance that her family had shown through generations. As Maria grew older, the desert became more than a place of wonder. It became a source of reflection. She noticed the way life in Las Palmas had its rhythms, harsh summers, sudden storms, and quiet nights that could feel both lonely and peaceful. She saw how her father's health began to waver with time, his movements slower, his sighs heavier, and his patience thinner. One afternoon she found him sitting on the porch, staring at the horizon with an expression she had never seen before. The usually steady man looked fragile, as if the desert sun had burned away some part of his energy. That day, Maria realized that life would not wait. Responsibilities were growing heavier, and the family she loved needed her more than ever. Maria had moved to Albuquerque after high school, seeking opportunities that Las Palmas could not offer. She had a small apartment in the city, worked long hours at a local bookstore, and had friends who were trying to carve out lives as unique as their own dreams. But Albuquerque felt different from home. It was fast, loud, and indifferent to the small joys she cherished. She missed the desert, the smell of sand after a rare rain, the way the wind could carry whispers from one end of town to the other, and most of all, she missed her father. When she received the call about her father's worsening condition, she knew she could not stay away any longer. It was time to return to Las Palmas, to the house where stones carried history and family was held together by more than just walls. The journey back was quiet, giving Maria time to reflect on the years she had spent away. She thought about her siblings, Carlos, the eldest, who had always seemed so practical and distant, Elena, the middle child, who struggled to find her place in the world, and little Thomas, whose laughter still echoed in her memory. She realized that her father's illness was not just a call to care for him, but a call to reconnect the family, to remind them of the ties that could not be broken, even when life pulled them in different directions. When she arrived at the house, the sight of it took her breath away. The stones glimmered in the late afternoon sun, warm and inviting, yet she noticed the cracks in the walls more clearly than ever. The garden her mother had once tended was overgrown. The porch swing creaked in the wind, and the air smelled of dry earth and memories. Her father was sitting in the living room, a blanket draped over his shoulders, looking smaller than she remembered. He smiled when he saw her, but there was a sadness in his eyes that Maria could not ignore. Over the next few days, Maria settled back into the rhythm of the house. She cooked meals, cleaned rooms, and spent time with her father, listening to stories she had heard 100 times, but now felt new and precious. She wandered the backyard, tracing her fingers over the rough stones of the walls, imagining her grandfather's hands placing each one carefully, like a craftsman leaving a piece of himself in every corner. One evening, she discovered an old journal tucked behind a loose stone in the fireplace. It belonged to her grandfather and was filled with sketches of stones, notes about their origin, and letters he had written to her father about family, perseverance, and the meaning of home. The journal sparked something in Maria. She felt a deep connection to her grandfather, to the stories of the desert, and to the strength that had been passed down through generations. But she realized that the house and the stones were more than just a home. They were a symbol of endurance, of love, and of the bonds that held her family together. But she also knew that the house, like life itself, needed care, attention, and dedication. One morning, Maria walked to the edge of the desert behind the house, the journal clutched in her hands. The wind tugged at her hair, and the sand shifted beneath her feet as if guiding her forward. She felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement. There was work to be done, memories to preserve, and perhaps even wounds to heal. She remembered her father's smile, fragile yet proud, and felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She also felt hope, a quiet, persistent hope that she could help restore not just the house but the family, and in the process, rediscover a part of herself she had left behind in the city. That night, as the desert sun sank behind the mountains and the sky turned shades of deep orange and purple, Maria sat on the porch, the journal open on her lap. She read her grandfather's words aloud, imagining him beside her, guiding her through the desert of life and memory. She realized that the journey she was about to take would not only be about gathering stones, but about understanding the true value of family, heart, and home. Each stone, each story, each step forward would be a part of something larger than herself, a testament to resilience, love, and the quiet strength that the desert had always whispered about. Maria finally closed the journal and looked out over the desert. The horizon was vast, endless, and full of possibilities. She knew the days ahead would be difficult, but she also knew that she was ready to face the challenges, ready to reconnect with her siblings, ready to honor her father's legacy, and most of all, ready to discover the true meaning of family. And so, With the desert wind at her back and the stories of her ancestors in her heart, Maria prepared to step into the journey that would change her life and her family's life forever. The morning after settling back into the house, Maria awoke before sunrise. The desert air was cool against her skin, a quiet calm that felt almost sacred. She wrapped herself in a light shawl and stepped outside onto the porch. The first rays of sunlight painted the sky in soft shades of pink and orange, and the desert stretched endlessly before her, silent yet alive. She felt a sense of anticipation building inside her, as though the desert itself was calling her to begin something important. Maria remembered the journal she had discovered the night before, her grandfather's careful handwriting etched across the pages. Each page was filled with sketches of stones, notes about their colors, sizes, and unique shapes, and even small maps showing where he had collected them. Her grandfather had believed that each stone carried a story, and collecting them had been more than a practical task. It had been a way of connecting with the desert, with life, and with family. Maria realized that she could continue his work, not just for the house, but as a way to feel closer to the family history that had shaped her. With determination, Maria packed a small backpack with water, snacks, a notebook, and a few tools that might help her gather stones. She left a note for her father, letting him know where she was going, and set off toward the first location marked in her grandfather's journal. The journey began with a short walk along a winding dirt path that led into the heart of the desert. She could feel the warmth of the sun growing stronger as she moved forward, and the sound of the wind through the sparse vegetation was both calming and energizing. The desert was beautiful but demanding. The sand shifted beneath her boots, making each step a little harder than the last. Small cacti and shrubs dotted the landscape, their stubborn green resilience a reminder of the strength required to survive in such a harsh environment. Maria paused often to admire the natural beauty, sketching stones in her notebook and taking notes on the unique formations she encountered. Each stone seemed to tell a story, the way it had been smoothed by wind, chipped by time, or marked with unusual patterns. She imagined her grandfather walking here decades ago, hand-picking stones with care, and she felt connected to him through this shared experience. As she moved deeper into the desert, Maria faced challenges that tested her patience and endurance. A sudden gust of wind kicked up sand into her eyes, forcing her to duck behind a rock until it passed. She stumbled over uneven terrain, scraped her hands on jagged stones, and felt the strain of walking longer than she expected. Despite the difficulties, she pressed on, motivated by the thought of restoring the house and honoring her family. Each obstacle reminded her that life itself was much like the desert, difficult, sometimes unforgiving, but also full of unexpected beauty and reward. During the midday heat, Maria found a small shaded area beneath a cluster of rocks. She sat down, drank water, and pulled out the journal to check the next stone location. The notes described a unique flat stone, reddish with streaks of white, that her grandfather had considered special. It was said to be difficult to find, hidden among a field of ordinary rocks. The description made her smile. She felt a thrill at the thought of discovering it. The challenge reminded her of why her grandfather had loved the desert so much. It demanded attention, patience, and care, but it also rewarded those who sought its secrets. Hours passed as Maria explored the terrain, carefully searching for the stone. She moved slowly, observing the ground, the shapes of rocks, and the patterns left by animals and wind. The desert was alive in ways she had never fully appreciated before. Birds swooped overhead, lizards darted across rocks, and in the distance a herd of deer grazed on sparse vegetation. Each moment reminded her that the desert was not empty. It was full of life, stories, and lessons waiting to be noticed. By late afternoon, Maria spotted something unusual. A stone glimmered in the sunlight, its reddish color streaked with white, exactly as her grandfather had described. Her heart raced with excitement as she approached it. The stone was heavier than she expected, and it took effort to lift it carefully. But she felt a sense of accomplishment, unlike anything she had experienced in the city. Holding it in her hands, she imagined the hands of her grandfather lifting it decades ago, thinking about the pride he must have felt in his work. It was more than just a stone. It was a piece of history, a tangible connection to her family, and a symbol of perseverance. With the first stone secured, Maria rested for a moment and looked around the desert landscape. She realized that this journey was more than just collecting stones. It was about discovery, understanding, and growth. She thought about her father, who had worked so hard to provide for the family, and about her siblings, who were each dealing with their own struggles. She wanted to bring them together, to share the lessons she was learning from the desert. Each stone could be a reminder of resilience, patience, and love, teaching them the importance of family and shared history. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, Maria started the walk back toward the house. The desert transformed with the changing light. The golden glow shifted to shades of deep orange and purple, and the shadows of rocks stretched long across the sand. The air grew cooler, and the wind carried the scent of earth and sagebrush. She felt a quiet joy, a sense of peace that came from connecting with the land and the stories it held. Carrying the stone, she felt a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. Upon returning home, Maria's father was sitting on the porch, watching the sky turn colors. His eyes lit up when he saw her, and he asked about her day. Maria carefully placed the stone on the table, and her father examined it closely, his fingers tracing the streaks and patterns. A smile spread across his face, a mixture of pride and nostalgia. "Your grandfather would have been proud," he said softly. The words warmed Maria's heart, and she realized that this journey was not just about the stones. It was about honoring her family and preserving the love and effort that had gone into building their home. That night, Maria shared stories from the desert with her father, describing the birds, the lizards, and the thrill of discovering the stone. Her father listened quietly, occasionally nodding, occasionally adding memories of his own experiences in the desert. For the first time in a long while, Maria felt a sense of closeness with him, a bridge forming between the past and the present. The house, once quiet and still, felt alive again with shared stories, laughter, and reflection. The next morning, Maria prepared to continue her journey. She planned to visit the next locations marked in her grandfather's journal, each promising unique stones and experiences. But she also knew the journey would not be easy. Some stones were far apart, hidden in rough terrain, and the desert had a way of testing those who ventured too far without preparation. She packed extra water, a small first aid kit, and a map, feeling both excitement and determination. Each step forward was a lesson in patience, observation, and respect for the land. As she walked into the desert again, Maria reflected on the lessons she had already learned. The desert demanded focus, resilience, and care, but it also offered wonder, discovery, and a deep connection to life. She thought about her siblings and how she hoped they could see the value of these lessons in their own lives. The journey was shaping her in ways she had not expected, teaching her humility, perseverance, and the importance of patience. She realized that life, like the desert, could be challenging, but the rewards came to those willing to engage fully with the world around them. By mid-morning, Maria reached a rocky area described in the journal as the next stone location. The terrain was steeper here, with large boulders and uneven ground. She had to climb carefully, testing each foothold, while keeping an eye out for the stones she sought. The climb was tiring, but Maria welcomed the challenge. Each step was a reminder that meaningful work required effort, focus, and a willingness to overcome obstacles. The desert was teaching her that every challenge had its reward, and she felt stronger, more confident, and more connected with each passing hour. Hours later, she found the second stone smoother than the first, with a subtle pattern that reminded her of waves frozen in time. She smiled as she lifted it, feeling the satisfaction of discovery and the growing connection to her grandfather and the history he had left behind. She carefully secured it in her backpack and began the journey back home, her heart light with pride and joy. When Maria returned, her father was waiting, this time joined by her younger brother, Tomas, who had grown curious about the journey. Maria shared the story of the second stone, showing its unique patterns and explaining the effort it took to find it. Tomas's eyes widened with wonder, and for a moment, Maria felt the beginnings of a bond forming through shared curiosity and discovery. Her father nodded silently, as if approving her efforts and the lessons she was learning from the desert. That night, Maria wrote in her own notebook, documenting the locations of the stones, the experiences of the day, and the feelings that had arisen along the way. She realized that the journey was not just about collecting stones. It was about reconnecting with herself, her family, and the land that had shaped generations. Each stone was a story, each step a lesson, and each moment a chance to honor her family's history. Maria fell asleep that night with a sense of peace and anticipation. The desert had already taught her so much, and she knew there were more lessons ahead. She felt ready for the challenges, the discoveries, and the journey that lay before her. Each day in the desert was a step toward understanding the true meaning of family, home, and heart. The following morning, Maria woke to a pale pink sunrise stretching across the desert horizon. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and earth warmed by the rising sun. Today she would head deeper into the desert, to locations her grandfather had marked as the most challenging to reach. She packed her bag carefully, making sure to include water, snacks, a small blanket, and a journal. Each item reminded her of the journey ahead, not just the physical trek, but the emotional journey that came with it. As she stepped onto the dirt path, the desert felt alive in ways she had not noticed before. The wind whispered through the sparse cacti and small animals scurried through the underbrush. Maria slowed her pace, taking time to observe the tracks in the sand, small paw prints of foxes, lizards darting from one rock to another, and birds' footprints near shallow pools of water. Every step reminded her that the desert was a living place, full of stories, challenges, and quiet beauty. Her first destination was a cluster of rocky hills where her grandfather had once collected stones with unusual markings, shaped by wind and water over decades. The climb was steep, and Maria found herself using both hands and feet to balance over the uneven terrain. The sun grew hotter with every step, and sweat ran down her back, but she welcomed the challenge. It reminded her that effort brought reward, and that patience and persistence were often the only ways to uncover something valuable. Halfway up the hills, Maria paused to rest beneath a large rock formation. She pulled out the journal, tracing the sketches of stones that her grandfather had noted were found in this area. Each sketch was detailed, showing lines, textures, and shapes that made the stones unique. Maria felt a connection to the past, imagining her grandfather kneeling on these same rocks, feeling the desert under his hands, and carefully selecting stones that he believed would strengthen the house and the family's legacy. She realized that collecting these stones was about more than building walls. It was about building memory, tradition, and love. As she continued, Maria faced an unexpected challenge. A sudden gust of wind swept through the hills, tossing sand and small pebbles in her face. She ducked behind a boulder, shielding her eyes, and waited until the wind subsided. Her heart raced, but she felt a thrill as well. The desert, she realized, demanded respect. It could be harsh and unpredictable, but it was also beautiful and rewarding for those willing to engage with it fully. This lesson mirrored her own life. Family, responsibilities, and challenges all required patience, effort, and care. After navigating the hills, Maria spotted a stone that matched one of her grandfather's sketches perfectly. It was large and smooth, with a swirling pattern that looked like waves frozen in time. She carefully lifted it, feeling its weight and imagining the years it had spent being shaped by wind and sun. Holding the stone, she felt a rush of pride and accomplishment, as though she had uncovered a secret meant just for her. This stone, like the others she had collected, felt alive with history, memory, and meaning. While resting to admire her find, Maria noticed a small, narrow trail leading further into the hills. Curious, she decided to explore it, thinking it might lead to another collection spot. The path became narrower and steeper, forcing her to climb carefully. At one point, she nearly slipped on loose sand, but a jagged rock helped her regain balance. Her heart pounded, but she felt alive in a way the city had never given her. The desert was teaching her courage, resilience, and careful observation, reminding her that challenges were part of every meaningful journey. Suddenly, she heard a faint sound behind her, a voice calling her name. Maria froze, scanning the landscape. She thought she might have imagined it, but the voice came again, clearer this time. Hesitant but curious, she followed the sound and soon found herself facing a familiar face. Miguel, an old childhood friend from Las Palmas. He had heard from neighbors that she was collecting stones and had come to see if she needed help. Maria felt a mixture of surprise and relief. The desert was vast and lonely, and having someone she trusted nearby brought comfort. Miguel had grown into a strong, capable young man. He carried a small bag with tools and water and offered to help Maria navigate the more difficult parts of the terrain. At first, Maria hesitated, worried about slowing down or sharing her journey, but she soon realized that having Miguel there made the work more enjoyable and less intimidating. Together, they climbed rocks, examined stones, and shared stories of their childhood. Laughter echoed through the hills, blending with the wind, and Maria felt a warmth in her heart that had been missing since leaving Las Palmas. As the afternoon sun grew stronger, Maria and Miguel found a stone unlike any other. It was smooth, almost glowing in the sunlight, with natural lines and curves that made it look like it had been carved by an artist. Maria knelt beside it, tracing the patterns with her fingers. She thought about her grandfather, imagining how he would have admired it. Collecting the stone required careful effort, and she and Miguel worked together to lift it, rolling it gently onto a piece of cloth for transport. The experience reminded Maria that life's greatest achievements were often shared, and that asking for help was not a weakness but a strength. After placing the stone safely in her bag, Maria and Miguel rested in the shade. Miguel asked about her father and siblings, and Maria shared what she had learned from her journey so far: the importance of patience, persistence, and appreciating the stories each stone carried. Miguel listened intently, occasionally nodding, and Maria realized that by sharing her journey, she was also strengthening her bond with people outside her immediate family. Her grandfather's lessons about connection, care, and respect were spreading in ways she had not anticipated. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Maria and Miguel started the long walk back toward the house. The desert transformed as the light changed, casting long shadows over rocks and creating a golden glow on the sand. Maria carried the stones carefully, feeling their weight but also their significance. Each stone was a symbol of effort, history, and connection. She realized that the journey itself, the walking, observing, struggling, and discovering, was as important as the stones themselves. Returning home, Maria's siblings had come to see the results of her work. Carlos, Elena, and Tomas were curious about the stones and the journey she had undertaken. Maria showed them the stones one by one, describing the challenges she had faced and the lessons she had learned. Her siblings listened, sometimes skeptical, sometimes amazed, but gradually they began to see the value of what she was doing. The desert stones were more than rocks. They were reminders of resilience, care, and the enduring power of family. That evening, the family gathered on the porch. Maria's father looked at her with pride. Her siblings looked at the stones with growing understanding, and the desert stretched endlessly beyond them, quiet and eternal. Maria felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the journey was helping to heal both the house and the family. The desert had tested her, taught her, and rewarded her with discovery, connection, and insight. She realized that the challenges of the desert mirrored the challenges of life, difficult, unpredictable, but ultimately meaningful for those willing to engage fully. Later, as night fell, Maria wrote in her journal about the day's experiences. She detailed the locations of the stones, the patterns she had observed, and the feelings she had experienced along the way. She reflected on how the desert had taught her resilience, patience, and humility. Each stone represented more than physical strength. It represented the strength of family, history, and connection. Maria knew that her journey was far from over, but she felt ready to continue, knowing that every step forward was a step toward understanding, healing, and growth. Before falling asleep, Maria looked out at the desert under the starlit sky. The quiet of the night brought a sense of peace and wonder. She realized that the desert, with all its beauty and challenges, was a teacher, a guide, and a companion. Her journey was not only about collecting stones, but about discovering the deeper truths of life, family, and heart. She felt gratitude for the opportunity to reconnect with her family, for the lessons the desert was teaching her, and for the chance to carry forward the legacy of her grandfather. And so Maria drifted to sleep with a heart full of hope, anticipation, and determination. The journey ahead would bring more challenges, discoveries, and growth, but she felt prepared. She knew that each day in the desert, each stone collected, and each connection made was part of a larger story. A story of family, resilience, and the enduring power of love. The desert had already begun to shape her, and she was ready to continue embracing all that lay ahead. The morning sun spilled golden light across the desert and the old stone house, casting long shadows on the walls Maria had come to love so deeply. Today felt different. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, as if the desert itself was holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. Maria stood on the porch, her backpack already packed with the stones she had collected, her journal tucked under her arm, and a renewed determination in her heart. She knew the next step of her journey was not out in the desert, but here, at home, with her family. Over the past few weeks, Maria had shared stories and stones with her father and her youngest brother, Thomas, and they had begun to understand the importance of the work she had undertaken. But Carlos and Elena remained distant, caught up in their own lives and responsibilities. Maria felt a mixture of hope and anxiety. She wanted them to be part of this journey, to help restore the house, and more importantly, to reconnect as a family. The desert had taught her patience, perseverance, and respect for life's rhythms, and she knew that bringing her siblings into this process would require all those qualities. Maria started the day by clearing the backyard of weeds and debris. She moved slowly, placing each stone she had collected in a line, imagining how they would fit into the house's walls. The sun was warm, and sweat beaded on her forehead, but she welcomed the physical labor. Each movement, each careful placement, felt like a prayer, a way of honoring her grandfather and her family. The house, with its uneven walls and creaking doors, seemed almost to breathe as she worked, alive with memories and potential. By mid-morning, Maria's father joined her outside. Though his movements were slow, his presence was steady and comforting. He brought a small hammer and chisel, tools he had used for years, and together they began to prepare the stones for placement. As they worked side by side, Maria noticed a sense of quiet understanding growing between them. Words were few, but the shared labor spoke volumes. Each stone they handled became a bridge between the generations, connecting the strength of her grandfather, the wisdom of her father, and Maria's own determination. In the afternoon, Elena arrived unexpectedly. At first, she hesitated at the edge of the yard, uncertain whether to step in. But when Maria waved and explained what she was doing, Elena's expression softened. She picked up a small stone, examining its patterns and textures, and slowly began to help. The work was physical, requiring patience and attention, but it also allowed space for conversation. As they lifted, placed, and adjusted stones, they spoke of memories from their childhood, playing hide-and-seek in the yard, helping their mother in the kitchen, and listening to their grandfather's stories on the porch. The air was filled with laughter, shared memories, and a growing sense of togetherness. Carlos arrived later in the day, looking serious and cautious. He had always been the practical one, focused on his career and responsibilities, but Maria hoped he would see the value of the work. When he saw the progress already made, the stones carefully arranged, the walls beginning to take shape, he paused, visibly impressed. Maria handed him a stone explaining its origin and significance. At first he placed it stiffly, but as he worked alongside his family, his movements became more natural, and a quiet smile appeared on his face. Slowly, the distance between them seemed to shrink. The desert stones, once simple rocks, had become instruments of connection, bringing the siblings together in a way words alone could not. Throughout the day, Maria noticed how the process of restoring the house was changing her family. Her father's eyes brightened with pride, her siblings' laughter grew more frequent, and even the house itself seemed to hum with energy. Each stone placed was more than a physical addition. It was a symbol of cooperation, love, and shared purpose. Maria felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that her efforts in the desert had created this moment, a moment where family could come together to honor the past and build for the future. As the afternoon sun began to dip, Maria suggested a break. They all sat on the porch, watching the light shift across the desert. The sky was painted with shades of orange, pink, and purple, and the air carried the gentle warmth of the fading day. Maria reflected on how far they had come, not just in terms of the house, but in the bonds between them. The stones had served as a catalyst, reminding everyone of their shared history and the importance of working together. She realized that the journey had not been about the stones themselves, but about the lessons they carried and the family connections they were helping to restore. After resting, they returned to work, tackling some of the more difficult sections of the house. Large stones had to be carefully positioned, requiring strength, coordination, and patience. Maria's father guided them, offering advice and encouragement. Elena and Carlos worked together, learning to trust one another's instincts and ideas. Tomas, the youngest, eagerly carried smaller stones and assisted wherever he could, his enthusiasm bringing a lightness to the labor. Maria felt a swell of pride as she watched her family collaborate, their movements coordinated and purposeful. It was as if the desert itself had taught them how to move together, how to listen, and how to support one another. As evening approached, the family stepped back to admire their progress. The walls were beginning to take shape, the stones carefully interlocked, each one a testament to effort, patience, and care. Maria felt a deep sense of accomplishment, not only for the physical work, but for the emotional journey her family had undertaken together. The house, once quiet and lonely, was now alive with the presence, energy, and collaboration of those who loved it. The desert, distant but ever present, seemed to glow in the twilight, a silent witness to their efforts. That night, after the family had eaten a simple meal together, Maria sat with her father on the porch. The stars sparkled overhead, the desert night calm and serene. She told him about her next plan, to continue exploring the remaining locations in the desert to find the last stones. Her father listened quietly, nodding, his eyes reflecting pride and a touch of worry. "Be careful," he said softly. "The desert can teach us wonderful things, but it can also be unforgiving. Remember what you've learned here? Patience, respect, and awareness. The stones will wait for you, but the desert demands attention." Maria nodded, grateful for his wisdom and support. In the days that followed, Maria and her family continued to work together. Each day brought new challenges, requiring problem-solving, strength, and collaboration. Sometimes stones were too heavy or oddly shaped, demanding creativity to fit them into the walls. Other times, memories arose that were difficult to face, old disagreements and frustrations that needed gentle patience and understanding to navigate. Yet, with every challenge, the family grew closer. They learned to listen to one another, to appreciate each other's efforts, and to celebrate small victories together. The process of restoring the house became more than physical labor. It became a form of storytelling. Each stone placed was a story shared, a memory honored, a lesson passed down. Maria's grandfather's influence was evident in every careful decision, and she felt his presence guiding them through the work. The desert had taught her patience and observation, but it was the shared labor of the family that taught her empathy, cooperation, and the power of love expressed through action. By the end of the week, significant progress had been made. The walls were more solid, the stones carefully aligned, and the sense of home stronger than it had been in years. Maria noticed subtle changes in her siblings. Elena seemed more confident, Carlos more responsible. Her father's health, while still fragile, seemed brighter in spirit, nourished by the sight of his family working together. A house once a quiet shell of memory was now alive with purpose, energy, and heart. One evening, as the desert sun set, Maria and her family gathered on the porch. The sky was painted with deep orange and purple hues, and the cool desert breeze carried the faint scent of sage and earth. They sat in comfortable silence, reflecting on the week's work, the challenges faced, and the lessons learned. Maria felt a profound sense of gratitude for the desert, for the stones, for her family, and for the journey that had brought them together. The house, standing stronger and more beautiful than before, was more than a structure. It was a symbol of resilience, love, and connection. That night, Maria wrote in her journal, documenting the work completed, the discoveries made, and the emotions felt. She reflected on how the desert had shaped her, how the stones had guided her, and how her family had grown closer through shared effort and patience. She realized that the journey was not only about the restoration of a house, but also about the restoration of hearts, relationships, and a sense of belonging. The desert stones had become a bridge between generations, connecting the past, present, and future in ways that were tangible, meaningful, and deeply moving. Maria fell asleep with a sense of fulfillment and anticipation. The journey was not over. There were still stones to find, walls to build, and stories to uncover. But she felt ready. She understood that the desert, her family, and the stones themselves were all teachers, guiding her toward understanding, compassion, and resilience. The house, now alive with effort and love, stood as a testament to the enduring power of family, the lessons of the past, and the possibilities of the future. The morning air was cool and fresh as Maria stepped out onto the porch. The desert stretched endlessly before her, golden light dancing across sand dunes and rocky hills. Today felt different. The house, which had once seemed worn and fragile, now stood taller, stronger, and filled with life. Each stone carefully placed over the past weeks reflected months of effort, patience, and love. Maria felt a quiet pride, but she also felt a sense of completion, the culmination of a journey that had begun in the desert and ended here, in the heart of her family. Her father was already outside, sitting in his favorite chair with a blanket over his shoulders, sipping coffee and watching the sun rise. He looked older than before, but there was a glow in his eyes, a mix of pride and peace that warmed Maria's heart. Her siblings were slowly emerging from the house. Elena stretched and yawned, smiling at Maria with a quiet joy. Carlos, usually serious and reserved, walked alongside Tomas, who was carrying a small basket filled with flowers he had picked from the garden. Together they made their way to the porch, forming a circle around the house that felt like a protective embrace. Maria stepped forward and placed her hand on one of the larger stones she had collected from the desert. She could feel its rough surface under her palm, smooth in some areas and jagged in others, shaped by time, wind, and patience. The stone reminded her of her grandfather, of his careful hands, and of the lessons he had left behind. Each stone in the house carried a story, a memory, and a piece of family history. She realized that the journey had been about more than gathering stones. It had been about understanding, reconnecting, and celebrating the bond that tied them together. The family began their final round of work, arranging the last stones to complete the walls and reinforce the foundation. Maria's father guided their movements, showing them the best angles and placements for stability. Elena helped with smaller stones, carefully filling gaps, while Carlos handled the heavier pieces with strength and precision. Tomas worked alongside Maria, handing stones and observing their patterns, learning the careful balance of effort and patience. Every movement was deliberate, every decision a shared effort. The house seemed to respond, its walls settling firmly, reflecting the energy and care poured into them. As they worked, memories flowed freely. They remembered their mother, who had nurtured their home with kindness and care, and their grandfather, whose stories had first inspired Maria's journey. Laughter filled the air as they recounted childhood games, mischievous adventures, and moments of quiet connection. Even the desert seemed to participate, its wind gently moving through the trees, rustling leaves, and whispering over the stones as if acknowledging their efforts. Maria felt a profound sense of gratitude for the land, for her family, and for the lessons that had shaped her journey. By afternoon, the house was nearly complete. The last stones were carefully fitted into place, each one a symbol of endurance, love, and family unity. Maria stood back to admire the work, feeling a warmth that went beyond physical satisfaction. The house had become more than a home. It was a testament to resilience, collaboration, and the beauty of shared purpose. Each stone held meaning, each wall held memory, and each room echoed with the laughter, effort, and care of generations. The desert stones had transformed from simple rocks into symbols of heart and family, tangible proof of what could be achieved through dedication and love. Her father joined her on the porch, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You've done something remarkable," he said softly. not just with the house, but with the family. You've reminded us what matters most. Maria felt a lump in her throat, her heart swelling with emotion. The journey had been long, challenging, and full of lessons, but this moment, here, with her family, in the home of her ancestors, made every step worth it. She looked at her siblings, each engaged and present, and felt a deep sense of connection that she had not experienced in years. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the family gathered outside to celebrate their accomplishment. They shared a simple meal together, prepared with care, sitting around a small table set near the garden. Thomas placed flowers in a small vase, adding color and life to the scene. Laughter and conversation flowed freely, and for the first time in months, Maria felt the family truly united. The desert beyond the garden shimmered in the fading light, a reminder of the journey that had brought them here and the lessons it had taught them along the way. After dinner, Maria suggested they walk around the house, observing the work from every angle. Each stone seemed to tell a story. The reddish stone from the hills, the smooth, patterned stone from the rocky path, and even the smaller stones carefully fitted into corners. Maria shared the origin of each, recounting the challenges of collecting them and the lessons learned along the way. Her siblings listened attentively, asking questions and recalling moments from the journey. The storytelling turned into a celebration of heritage, effort, and the unbroken bond of family. As night fell, the desert sky unfolded in a blanket of stars. Maria, her father, and her siblings sat on the porch in comfortable silence, gazing at the sparkling expanse above. The desert wind carried a soft, soothing rhythm, rustling leaves and whispering across the stones. Maria reflected on how far they had come, from the first steps into the desert, through challenges, discoveries, and moments of doubt, to the completion of the house and the rekindling of family bonds. She realized that the journey had been as much about heart and connection as it had been about stones and walls. Maria's father broke the silence, his voice gentle but firm. "The house is strong, but the family is stronger. That is the lesson here." Maria nodded, understanding that the work in the desert, the stones collected, and the labor poured into the house had all served a greater purpose. They had rebuilt not only a home, but also the bonds that held the family together, strengthening connections that would last for generations. The desert had been their teacher, the stones their guides, and their shared effort the foundation of something enduring and meaningful. Later that night, Maria sat in her room, the journal open on her lap. She wrote about the stones, the desert, and the journey that had brought them together. She reflected on her father's words, the laughter of her siblings, and the quiet strength of the desert. Every page she filled felt like a step toward understanding herself, her family, and the legacy they carried. She realized that the journey was never truly about completing a task. It had always been about growth, connection, and heart. Each stone collected and each wall built represented a lesson learned, a memory honored, and a promise kept. The next morning, Maria woke early to watch the sunrise over the desert. She felt a profound sense of peace and fulfillment. The house, standing tall and strong, was no longer just a home. It was a living testament to resilience, love, and the enduring power of family. She walked through the rooms, touching the walls, tracing the patterns of the stones, and imagining her grandfather's pride. Each corner of the house carried history, effort, and heart. Maria knew that this home would continue to stand, not only as shelter, but as a reminder of the journey, the lessons learned, and the bonds strengthened through shared experience. Her siblings joined her on the porch, and together they looked out over the desert. The air was cool and filled with possibility. Maria felt a quiet joy, knowing that their family had grown stronger, not just through effort, but through understanding, patience, and love. She realized that the journey, while now complete in one sense, would continue in the hearts of her family. The lessons of the desert, the significance of the stones, and the unity they had created would carry forward, shaping the lives of all who lived in this home. As the day progressed, the family began to make small improvements to the surrounding garden. Tomas planted flowers, Elena watered the shrubs, and Carlos helped build a small fence to protect the plants. Maria assisted where needed, but mostly she observed, marveling at how much their efforts had transformed not just the house, but the spirit of the family. The home had become a space of life, joy, and shared purpose. The desert beyond, still vast and challenging, seemed to mirror their journey, sometimes harsh, sometimes beautiful, but always full of lessons and growth. In the evening, the family gathered once more on the porch. They shared stories of the past, hopes for the future, and reflections on the journey that had brought them together. Maria spoke of the desert stones, explaining how each had been a teacher, a challenge, and a symbol of connection. Her siblings listened, nodding in agreement, and her father offered quiet encouragement. Together they celebrated not just the restoration of the house, but the restoration of their hearts and their bonds. As the stars appeared in the sky, Maria felt a deep sense of gratitude. She thought of her grandfather, whose vision had inspired this journey, her mother, whose memory guided them, and her family, whose cooperation had made it all possible. The desert, with its endless horizon and quiet strength, had been a companion, a teacher, and a guide. The stones, once simple rocks, had become symbols of love, resilience, and the enduring power of family. Maria knew that their journey would live on, not only in the walls of the house, but in their hearts and in the stories they would tell for years to come. Maria closed her journal, her heart full. She looked around at her family, at the home they had restored together, and at the desert stretching endlessly beyond. The journey had been long and sometimes difficult, but it had been beautiful, meaningful, and unforgettable. Each stone, each story, and each shared moment had brought them closer, teaching them lessons that would stay with them for a lifetime. And in that quiet, starlit night, Maria understood the true meaning of the journey of family, heart, and the desert stones.